In 1928, Chiang Kai-shek's Northern Expedition ended, uniting China, at least on paper. A new central government was formed in Nanjing by the Kuomintang, but after a demobilization conference, the Allied warlords disagreed on how to continue. By the end of 1929, they formed a coalition against Chiang, who refused to resign from the KMT. The former Fengtian clique in Manchuria remained loyal to Chiang, but the new coalition of the Guangxi Army, the Guominjung's Northwest Army, and the Shanxi Army planned a campaign in the Central Plains, after which this new civil war was named. In May 1930, Chiang initiated an offensive, but he lost against the Northwest Army in a costly battle, and he was almost captured. However, his opponents did not cooperate, so soon Guangxi forces were pushed back to their own province in the south. Then the Shanxi army was beaten, recapturing Jinan in August, and another offensive commenced against the Northwest Army. In September, Zhang Shualiang, head of the Manchurian Northeast Army, declared his support for Chiang and took Beijing, after which the coalition fell apart. In November, the Northwest and Shanxi armies retreated, and while the Nanjing government was victorious, its relations with the remaining warlords remained tenuous. Very soon, attention turned to the Communists, who still represented a significant threat, mainly in southern provinces. A series of encirclement campaigns were launched to destroy the Chinese Red Army, but the first two against Honghu failed, while the third had to be aborted due to another conflict with anti-Chiang factions who set up a rival government in Guangzhou with the son of Sun Yat-sen and Wang Jingwei, Chiang's old rival. However, civil war was averted as the Japanese invaded Manchuria in September 1931 after the Mukden incident. Chiang had to resign as president and premier, but his influence was restored when he became chairman of the Military Affairs Commission. Nonetheless, he kept his rival, Wang Jingwei, as premier to appease the left wing of the party. Japan, fearful of a growing Soviet influence, wanted to take Manchuria with its raw materials and industry for itself, although the government in Tokyo was against a full invasion. However, officers of the Kwantung Army orchestrated the incident, and after 5 months, Manchuria was in Japanese hands. In January 1932, after deliberate provocation, clashes with Japanese troops broke out in Shanghai. The fighting lasted until May, after which a ceasefire agreement was signed and Japanese forces withdrew, but the city itself became a demilitarized zone, so only a small Chinese police force could remain there, apart from the foreign troops that were guarding the international settlement. To cement their rule over Manchuria, in March, they formed the puppet state of Manchukuo and installed the last emperor of China, Henry Puyi, as chief executive. The aggression was condemned by the League of Nations, but Japan simply walked out and left the organization, stunning the world. After this hiatus, Chiang's nationalist army launched the fourth campaign in 1932 against Hubei, Henan, and Anhui. It was successful, but communist forces escaped, so a fifth campaign was needed. But first, they had to suppress a rebellion in Fujian, which was led by officers that had participated in the Shanghai incident. They had personal disagreements with Chiang and wanted stronger resistance to foreign interference, more social reforms, and the overthrow of the Nanjing government, so they declared their own in November 1933. Loyalist troops started an offensive against the Fujian government in January 1934, overwhelming their forces and defeating the rebels. Right after that, a fifth attack against the communists was launched, with a new tactic that involved the patient building of blockhouses and cutting supply lines. The communists were beaten, Their remaining troops started their long march, reaching Yan'an in Shanxi in 1935, establishing their own rule there, with Mao Zedong as their leader. In these campaigns, German military advisors played an important role. Military cooperation with Germany had started back in 1926 with the arrival of Colonel Max Bauer. 46 other officers arrived to train nationalist troops, helping them win the Central Plains War. The Great Depression reduced trade between the two countries, but advisors returned after the Mukden incident, which showed the need for a centrally planned national defense industry. In 1933, Generaloberst Hans von Seeckt arrived. He called for a much smaller but well-trained and German-equipped army with 80 elite divisions. Military leadership was centralized, railway construction accelerated, and German industrial products were delivered in return for Chinese raw materials. However, the warlords could not agree on which divisions to disband and merge, and when the Japanese invasion commenced in 1937, Hitler chose to work with Japan instead, abandoning China. As the Nanjing government continued to fight for supremacy, it also had to implement reforms to finally reduce the gap between China and the developed nations. They followed Sun Yat-sen's teachings, according to which China was not yet ready for full democracy, so the one-party KMT rule was preserved. All rivals, like the communists, were eliminated. Despite the obvious political limitations, economic and social reforms were implemented, improving the country's chances of survival, although moderate land reforms were blocked by allied warlords and local landlords. Because of this, poor peasants were a constant source of manpower for the communists, who managed to survive even after losing 1.5 million men in the purges and encirclement campaigns. Even though corruption and embezzlement remained huge problems, the economy grew. On average, GDP increased by 3.9% every year, while GDP per capita also grew by 1.8%. Women's rights and education were supported, literacy increased. The Academia Sinica was founded, followed by the Central Bank of China in 1932. The Great Depression and the Japanese invasion of Manchuria hit the economy hard, but it recovered by 1936, along with foreign investments. Japan invested the most, followed by Great Britain. A new currency was introduced, and although it did not eliminate all its older rivals, it also helped restore economic power. In the countryside, the overproduction of agricultural goods led to falling prices. Periodic famines cost the lives of more than 11 million people. Already an increasing gap developed between the prosperous East and the poor West. Following the work of previous decades, the National Language Commission finally settled on the Beijing dialect as the basis of a standard national pronunciation. In 1932, they published a dictionary which normalized the pronunciations for all characters. The government supported village projects, a series of experiments involving educational foundations and government zones which aimed to change the Chinese countryside. With some restrictions, it strengthened the village economy, culture, and political structure. Chiang's government pressured their foreign partners to drop the unequal treaties that had been forced on China in previous decades, but most of these were eliminated only in World War II. In remote Xinjiang, Chiang's Muslim ally, the Ma clique, tried to overthrow the local Soviet client regime, but this led to a Soviet invasion in 1934. 3 years later, an Islamic rebellion broke out, but the Soviets suppressed it, which Chiang watched passively as he didn't want confrontation with another foreign power. By then, his moderate responses to repeated Japanese aggression were seen by many as too weak, and this led to the Xi'an incident in December 1936. His ally, Zhang Shualiang, simply kidnapped Chiang and convinced him to end the civil war against the communists, forming a second united front, preparing for the coming war with Japan. His old rival, Wang Jingwei, disagreed because he believed that the Western imperialist powers posed a greater threat to China, so he advocated an agreement with the increasingly aggressive Japan. Not long after the actual invasion, he would switch sides and fight against Chiang's China as the head of a Japanese client state, but that will be the topic of another video. Thank you for watching. See you next time.